NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. We're less than 2 weeks away from the March for the Food Bank, and we'll talk with veteran marcher, the leader of Team Taco, food justice warrior, and indigenous chef, Neftali Duran, as well as sustainable agricultural advocate and activist, Margot, both from the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective. Later in the show, we'll check out their new compost hub.
Look at you with all that alliteration.
I love it.
And after our feature from last week highlighting the locally produced documentary film about book bans in South Carolina, a fictionalized film based on the true story of book banning in the Berkshires will have a screening in the Berkshires tonight. We'll talk to the writer, director, and star of A Book by Their Cover, John Tedeschi. But first, to the Capitol.
How are you?
How are you?
Everything is great.
Somehow you seem a little bit less believable than last week when we were talking.
Yeah, well, Matt Gaetz is Attorney General,
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure. Time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Worcester's own Jim McGovern. First of all, the mayor of the city of Worcester on Sunday declared it to be Wu-Tang Clan Day in Worcester, which is some of the best news I've heard in a long time. I don't know how much you know about the iconic 90s hip-hop group from Staten Island, but...
I don't know very much about them, but but if it makes you happy, I'm happy.
It does, because as many lawn signs said during this last election campaign, presidents are temporary, Wu-Tang is forever. And that's where we are right now, because as of last night officially, Democrats have lost control of the House of Representatives, or I guess they did not regain control of the House of Representatives. You will remain, as far as I know, the ranking member of the Rules Committee, as opposed to taking over the gavel and becoming the chair. The GOP has the Oval Office, of course, now the Senate and the House. There's argument to be made they have the Supreme Court as well. I believe you're back in action in D.C. this week. What is the mood, especially among Democrats, and what is the strategy?
Well, look, I wish it had turned out differently, because I think with the Republicans controlling both chambers and the presidency and, to a certain extent, the Supreme Court, some of the guardrails that we're counting on to protect this country are not there. But that doesn't mean we're powerless. The Republicans, at the end of the day, will have a very narrow majority here in the House, and we need to show up. We need to be here for every vote, and we need to use our voices. The press needs to step up to the plate and make sure that people understand what is happening. And individual citizens have to step up and use their voices in protest when we see policies that we believe are wrong for this country. I feel a sense of purpose, and that purpose is to protect my constituents and to fight for our values and to take on Trump and the Republicans when they're moving us in a direction that, quite frankly, we disagree with. So
how will the Democrats do that? I mean, you did say that there are going to be tools at your disposal. It's not like a super majority within the Congress.
Right.
So what will those tools be?
Well, we have to try to appeal to some middle-of-the-road Republicans who narrowly won re-election in districts that could have easily gone Democratic. That, look, the midterms are 2 years away, and if you're voting in a way that undermines security of your constituency, well, you know what? You're not coming back here in 2 years. So we need to do that. We need to use the committees to make sure that we are setting the record straight and answering questions and doing proper oversight. We need to use any procedural tools available to us to be able to frustrate efforts, by the Republicans that, again, may further restrict a woman's right to choose, or if they try to add some garbage to bills, that are anti-LGBTQ plus. I mean, whatever. The Senate still has the filibuster, and they don't have a supermajority in the Senate. So there are some stuff, but there's no doubt. I mean, there's an advantage to being in control of the House and the Senate. You get to control the agenda. And if you have the most votes, you end up prevailing at the end of the day. Look, I said this before the campaign, and I said this the day after the campaign. Donald Trump told us who he is. For those who said, oh, he won't be that bad, or that there are people that will reel him in, well, those guardrails are getting fewer and fewer and fewer. And with his announcement that he wants Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General of the United States, I got to tell you, the alarm bells should be going off.
For those who haven't been following this too much, tell us why. I mean, he's under investigation from the Senate. He's resigned his House seat. Tell us why you're so concerned.
He resigned his House seat because the Ethics Committee, the bipartisan Ethics Committee, was about to issue a report pointing out some very significant misconduct by Mr. Gates. I mean, he was under investigation by the Justice Department for sex trafficking. You hear some of the Republicans, including Kevin McCarthy, who credits Gates with getting him ousted from the speakership because, according to McCarthy was about to expose the fact that Gates had a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. There were numerous instances of relationships with minors. I mean, that's what is alleged. But when you resign, then the ethics process stops. Mm-hmm. So he resigned 2 days before the ethics committee was going to act. And again, I mean, he, is a defender of January 6th. He wants a full pardon of all those who attacked the Capitol and who beat up 140 police officers. I mean, he is the ultra MAGA leader in the House of Representatives. That's your pick for Attorney General, or Fox News host is going to be your pick for Secretary of Defense, or Tulsi Gabbard is going to be put in a position where she's going to have access to, our nation's top intelligence. Again, the alarm bell should be going off. And I'm not even sure there's going to be a confirmation process. I mean, now we hear Trump talking about bypassing the Senate and doing recess appointments. Again, with every day that goes by, he's showing us his authoritarian tendencies. And I am deeply worried about where this is all going.
It is within the president's constitutional powers to do these recess appointments, however, though, and I have been seeing many Republican-leaning folks and MAGA folks saying that this is just within his constitutional authority. What would be so improper if this were the way to get the cabinet appointments through?
Because it's usually been used for much lower appointments. I mean, the idea that you're going to have an attorney general or a secretary of defense and no hearings, no questioning, no background checks, no nothing, if that's the way people think presidents should be able to appoint their cabinet, then okay. We have learned over the years that confirmation processes are important. You get to ask questions about, a particular nominee's view. Sometimes we find out that the nominee is not fit and they move on to somebody else. The casual tone of some that, he has the power to do this, so we, even though this is not the way it's been done, it really is striking. If Kamala Harris were elected and we're suggesting that she do recess appointments and bypass the United States Senate confirmation process, all hell would have broke loose. But again, I think this is another indication of Donald Trump's kind of authoritarian tendencies. And it's shocking to me that more people are not shocked.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, who will remain the ranking member in the House Rules Committee, as the Democrats have not regained control of the House. Some listener questions. Cheryl from Shelburne Falls wants to know, with the Farm Bill set to expire at the end of this year, what do you foresee happening? Will Congress pass a new bill during the lame duck session or wait until Republicans have a greater advantage in the new year? She says so many of us are concerned about protecting SNAP and important programs for farms in our region. And then she goes on to say, thank you for your terrific show. Oh, thank you, Cheryl. What's your response to that question?
So the Senate has not put a farm bill together. The House did. And in the House Farm Bill, it cut SNAP by $30 billion. That's billion with a B. That's unacceptable. So I think what will have to happen is that Congress will have to vote on an extension of the 2018 Farm Bill, which does not have any cuts in SNAP and nutrition programs contained in it. I hope they would do it for a year, but they may do it only for a few months and deal with it next year. If the House bill were acceptable, then we could have maybe worked out a deal with the Senate. But the House bill is deeply flawed. I think an extension of the old Farm Bill is what may happen, and we're going to have to live to fight another day.
Dan Finn, a listener, wants to know, what do you think about creating a liberal populist Project 2026 that would be released before the midterms? He also wants to know if you believe, is their hate better organized than our love? And if that is the case, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to figure out is why we are not connecting with more people, why so many in our own base did not show up, and what motivated his base to show up. He didn't overperform, but he did what he needed to do. But a number of Democrats stayed home. I think we need to figure out whether our message is off, whether or not our traditional ways of campaigning are outdated. I mean, we all thought that a good ground game, knocking on doors, going door to door, was the thing to do. And it turned out that he reached more people through various podcasts and social media posts and kind of untraditional talk shows. And I think we have to figure all that out. I don't know what the answer, what all the answers are. A reporter asked me about, what do I think we did wrong? I don't know yet, right? I mean, and I think the appropriate thing for all of us to do is to listen, and to talk to people, real people as to, what they think. I mean, I look at my vote numbers, thousands and thousands of people that voted for me also voted for Donald Trump. I don't get that. I don't understand that. And I want to talk to some of these people to help me understand why, because to me, it doesn't seem logical, but people did it. We need to figure that out. I think we need to listen. We all have opinions, and some of these opinions may be right or they may be wrong. But we really need to do a deep dive, and that's going to take some time.
We did have another listener question from Dr. Dave, who will be joining us on the Food Bank March, and it was a little bit more towards the conspiratorial. But he wants to know if there's anybody having talks about why Trump told voters at one point, we have enough votes, you don't even need to vote. There was the whole whatever the little secret is with Speaker Mike Johnson, and then there's these what seem to be very strange votes where you would vote for the practically most communist member of the House of Representatives, Jim McGovern, and then vote for Donald Trump. So even the major media outlets have sort of debunked this. Is there anybody talking in these terms about maybe there was something odd about this election from a malfeasance standpoint?
Yeah, well, elections are run primarily at state and local levels, right? And again, if there are things that happen that seem off, then they need to be investigated. But our Justice Department, has no love for Donald Trump, and there have been no reports out of the Justice Department that anything conspiratorial has happened. And it may be that people just wanted to shake things up. A number of people said that, they thought things were better for them in terms of cost of living under Trump than under Biden. We need to understand this. We need to spend the time and be thoughtful about it. And, with all due respect to my colleagues who are rushing out and saying it's this or that or this or doing op-eds, this is what we should have done differently. I think we should be humble enough to say, let's study this. Let's talk to people, not just talk to ourselves. Let's get this right. And I think we will do that.
Well, one of your colleagues does have an idea about what might have went wrong, and it raised some eyebrows in the state and the country. Seth Moulton, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, ran for president himself, a veteran, has declared a wake for woke and was quoted as saying, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Taking on the trans issue, and especially trans people in sports issue, our friend Dallas Ducar, who used to run Trans Health in Western Mass, just got a new appointment for Fenway Health this week, wrote a rebuttal article in the Boston Globe. Is this the new direction that you think the Democrats should be taking? And what's your response to Seth Moulton's take on this?
I thought it was unfortunate that was the first thing that he said, because I don't believe that was the reason why Kamala Harris didn't win. We get a lot of calls from trans individuals in my district, who express concern and quite frankly feel like they're now become targets. And I think we have to make sure that we are providing a circle of protection around vulnerable communities in the aftermath of this election. But how about you listen to people and try to really do a deep dive as to why people voted the way they did before anybody shoots their mouth off. That's my view on all of this. And I'll be honest with you, I did a lot of campaigning in my district in New Hampshire and in other places. I never heard anybody raise that as a primary concern in this campaign. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I wish he hadn't said what he said. And I quite frankly wish he would acknowledge the hurt that he's caused amongst the trans community.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, before I let you go, Congressman, there was a meeting in the Oval Office yesterday between the president and the president/president-elect. It is a return to the sort of ceremony and form of years prior in the history of this country. What's your reaction to the Oval Office meeting yesterday between President Biden and former and future President Trump?
Well, look at it. Joe Biden did what you're supposed to do. And that is you greet the president-elect. When Joe Biden won 4 years ago, Donald Trump did not extend that courtesy to Joe Biden. And I think it shows that, Biden respects our longstanding traditions. He's a class act, and the other guy isn't. Biden is interested in trying to make sure that there is a peaceful transfer of power and that there's not the chaos that there was when he became president and Trump stirred up, all those protests. So, I know it must have been difficult for Joe Biden, but he did, what he thought was right, and I respect that.
We are less than 2 weeks away from the March for the Food Bank. It'll be November 25th and 26th. 43 miles over 2 days, raising money and awareness for the Food Bank of Western Mass. You'll hear us on this show and the NEPM News Department with Hunger Awareness Week all next week, and we've had many interviews already. You still have time to join the congressman and me and dozens, if not hundreds at certain times, of others who will be walking these 43 miles. There are a lot of people that I can tell are feeling somewhat hopeless about the future. This is one way to regain a little bit of hope and do some good for your neighbors in need, while at the same time advocating for some real change on the state and the federal level. That march for the food bank, once again, is the 25th and 26th of November, and you can still sign up and start a team or support a team and find out all the details at foodbankwma.org. Are you looking forward to it, Congressman?
Yeah, I am, and I think you've summed it up right. I mean, if people want to do something good and positive and real, this is it. And we can help countless members of our community get access to nutritious food. And those of us who believe that food should be a fundamental human right believe that we all need to do more. Hunger is still a problem in our Commonwealth. It's a problem in our country. It's certainly a problem all around the world. And this is one way to fight that. And Republicans have told me that Joe Biden can control the weather, so maybe I can call him and see what they can make sure that the weather is good on those Tuesdays.
Yes.
So that would be a nice thing to do. But I hope everybody who's listening will join us. You don't have to march the whole thing. You can do a mile, you can do a half a mile, or you can just come and greet us along the way. But it would be nice if there's a really huge show of support. The food bank does great work, and this is actually even though it's physically difficult, it's a fun thing to do.
And we'll dive into the weeds a little bit more about hunger on the local and federal level when we talk again next week. And you can send questions for our congressman to thefab413@nepm.org, and I'll ask him on your behalf. Thanks as always, Congressman.
All the best.
Later in the show, a short film fictionalizes the very real attempt at book banning that went on in the Berkshires earlier this year, and that film will have a screening in the Berkshires tonight. We'll talk with the writer and director of A Book by Their Cover, John Tedeschi.
But up next to Holyoke, where compost and community are coming together to make a more equitable food system in one of our communities with the greatest need. We'll talk with Chef Neftali Duran and sustainable agriculture advocate Margot from the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield, with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
We are on Dwight Street in Holyoke. You just put a dried mango in your mouth. Oh, fine. What's your name?
Neftali.
Neftali Duran, our friend, an indigenous chef from Oaxaca, food justice advocate here in Holyoke, your adopted hometown, when you're not going back to visit your mom in Oaxaca.
I've heard about his Proyecto Durazenda on Indigenous Peoples Day.
Right, about the reforestation stuff you're doing down there, as well as sometimes bringing us the best mezcal. And now that you finished your dried mango, what's your name?
My name is Margot Wise.
You're from the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective. Tell us what the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective is.
Yeah, we are a group of 5 now co-directors. So we have an equal power structure. We're a fiscally sponsored community organization that does food access work in Holyoke. We are doing a bunch of different projects to build a better food system here. We're in the Connecticut River Valley, which is known for its local agriculture movement. We have lots of productive farms kind of up north in the valley and food co-ops and thriving farmers markets. But then you come down here to Holyoke and we only have 2 full-service grocery stores. We have 60 corner stores. Only about 10 of them actually sell fresh produce. And the food insecurity rate is about 48% here. It's a pretty drastic divide. The term tofu curtain was coined here. It's on Wikipedia.
Merriam-Webster is looking at it very closely for addition into the dictionary as well.
Yeah.
And I should explain that because sometimes people get offended when they hear the term tofu curtain. But the idea being that there is a divide psychologically between what goes on north of Holyoke in beautiful and affluent Northampton and Amherst and East Hampton now versus what goes on south of the so-called tofu curtain, the Holyoke Range, the mountain range in Holyoke and Chicopee and Springfield and beyond.
Yeah, it's also a socioeconomic and cultural divide.
And a racial divide.
Yes. Yeah, Holyoke is, as of 2021, is 53.3% Latinx and most of those people are Puerto Ricans. Yeah, the different projects we do, gleaning and food rescue. We've done policy work here and there throughout our 4 years together for advocating for better food policy. We have a diaper bank, which seems unusual, but we believe that people shouldn't have to choose between food and diapers. And the pantries, for the most part, don't give them out. You can't get them on SNAP. So that's been one of our most consistent projects. In the spring, in partnership with Windy Ridge Farm, we have a seedling CSA share that people can buy with SNAP and HIP so that they can get affordable plant starts for their gardens.
And it's specific to Holyoke. Out of Windy Ridge, like there is a specific Holyoke seedling CSA, which is wicked cool. Like it's tailored to the population that is here and what they'd like to see and what views plant-wise and produce-wise.
Exactly. This year we're actually gonna time things a little better and line it up with our garden bed builds. So we build garden beds in residents' backyards. We can't build them for everyone that applies, but we choose from the applicants based on need mainly. And this year we'll build 16 garden beds in people's yards. Over the years, we've probably built over 30 at this point. In addition to that now, we make bucket planters, so 5-gallon buckets with soil and a tomato plant or a pepper plant. And that's really expanded the program so that people living in apartments and different living situations can also get a garden from us. Those have been our main projects. Now we are at this compost hub at Dwight Street Garden, which is our brand new project as of end of September. We're really excited about it. The idea is that it's a community compost bin. It's a solid 3-bin system. It's not much bigger than one that somebody might have in their backyard. It's just 9 feet by 3 feet, so 3 cubic yard bins. The entire thing is lined with hardware cloth, so it's completely rodent proof. And
we learned this the hard way with my compost bin at my house. Rats seem to love compost.
Oh yeah.
Especially when you live near the river.
Also raising my hands, damn you woodchucks.
They do love it.
So tell me about how this works. Anybody from like the neighborhood who wants to start composting can just bring their stuff here. And I'm seeing that all the signs of what is here is in English and in Spanish.
Yes, and all of our education materials online, everything's in English and in Spanish. It is free for everyone that signs up. We do just require people to go through a quick training as part of the sign-up process. So the whole sign-up process takes about half an hour. You have to watch an educational video about how to do it, what goes in, what doesn't, take a little quiz, and it's pretty easy. Everyone passes. And then once you pass the quiz, then you sign some agreements, and then that's it. And then we email you the code to the lock, so it's got a padlock on it. And then people dump their food scraps, and we provide the browns or the carbonaceous materials. So
we're looking at a big Rubbermaid barrel.
Yeah, and then we have these also like covered in Rubbermaid barrels because we don't want to create habitat for pests either. So one of the bins has wood chips, the other one has sawdust. Right now it could change, we could put leaves or something. So people put the food scraps in, then they're advised to completely cover it with this brown material. And the great thing is that it hardly smells because of that, and it doesn't look yucky or anything. Through this, I think we can really change the way people think about waste management, about composting. It's cool to get people involved in the process. The people who sign up are asked, if they can, to volunteer once a year, also turning the compost.
You got one of those big barrels with a crank to turn the compost when it makes its way over to there.
That actually goes to the community garden.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So is that a collaboration? Because we're at the compost hub is right next to the community garden on Dwight Street.
Yeah, the Dwight Street Community Garden is actually managed and I think owned by Neighbor to Neighbor, and they are just letting us use a little piece of land for our community compost hub. We actually hope to build more of these hubs around the city. We would love to see one kind of in walking distance of people in every neighborhood. There really isn't a lot of options for composting in Holyoke unless you can pay for like a private company to pick it up at your house.
I know it's the beginning of this project, but once the compost is finished and goes through all 3 stages, because like you add your raw ingredients, you wait, that moves it into the cooking where it's breaking down into better soil, and then the cooling part where it's basically kind of finished. But what will happen to the compost that you make through the Holyoke Compost Hub?
On our sign-up form, we actually had a question, if we were to divide up the finished compost between the hub members, Would you want some? And most people said no or maybe. We're actually thinking, since we're located in the garden, it probably just makes the most sense to give it to Dwight Street Garden and spread it out right here. Then we don't have to transport it. You know, if and when we make more hubs in different places, we can figure out how to divide it up.
Khalees wants to buy it.
Of course, we'll give it to you.
Compost is always useful if you garden and if you're trying to garden better. And it's weirdly hard to come by here.
And it's expensive.
Yes.
I think this year we bought like at least 2 truckloads of compost for the buckets and the gardens that we build for people. So it adds up.
Yeah, we need to have a compost facility in the southern half of the valley, but that's another issue. We're actually not as concerned about like what's going to happen with the finished compost. I think that'll be the easy part. The main thing is diverting the food scraps, right? If it stays here and becomes beautiful, rich soil, it's building the soil, and we have urban soils here, feeding the soil, and we can grow new food with it. If it goes to the landfill, on the other hand, it becomes toxic methane gas, which is 80 times more potent than greenhouse gas. And typically, landfills and incinerators are located near low-income communities and communities of color. So if we kind of zoom out, this really does have a ripple effect. One of these bins can process about like 350 pounds of food, which is a lot of weight going into the garbage. In the U.S., our household garbage is about 25% food scraps. If we can expand this and, you know, hopefully at some point even get residential curbside pickup in Holyoke, that would be like the Holy Grail.
The Holyoke Grail.
Yeah.
He can join us in our quest for the Holy Grail.
Well, I'll ask him, but I don't think he'll be very keen.
Love it. Yeah, then we could really make a huge impact on climate change and ecological justice. We're pretty excited about this.
Margot, you mentioned that there's a diaper bank that is associated with the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective. Chef Neff, you just got back from there. Tell us about where that's happening and how great that need is and what you've been doing with diapers as part of the Holyoke Food, but also Equity Collective.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big need for diapers. I posted today diapers and formula is one of the greatest needs for families with children. They're expensive, and if you have 2 or 3 children, you know, it adds up really fast, especially if you are experiencing poverty. The need is greater than we can provide, and also, you know, hopefully people are seeking other agencies, including WIC, for diapers, but we will never be able to fulfill that need. And right now we have a fundraiser going on to make sure that we have monthly donors to fulfill the needs for next year.
The thing with the diaper bank is we're just constantly pouring in money into it because we're just buying diapers and giving them to people. We found that that's much more efficient than running diaper drives because we can buy the cheapest diapers and make the most of that money. We are running a fundraising campaign right now. We're trying to get $1,000 in new monthly donations by January 1st. That would be huge. We actually have just seen a real surge in demand lately. We do it in front of Margaret's Pantry, and the people that come to us tend to be the people that are also getting groceries there. And we think the word is spreading just because suddenly we're running out of diapers really quickly and we need more money.
There was a state-level initiative to try to create some sort of diaper bank. Does anybody know where that lives right now?
I don't know where that lives, but if it goes the way HEAP is going right now, where they're defunding the health incentives programs, I have no hope at the moment.
Neff, I know you've led a bunch of times gleaning initiatives at different farms in the area through the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective. How has that been over the course of this past growing season? And is there still a gleaning volunteer need?
There's always a gleaning volunteer need. This year we've been partnering with other bigger organizations that have staff. We are all volunteers. Hopefully at some point we can get paid. But so far we've been volunteering. But there are organizations that do gleaning and have staff and have a capacity to coordinate volunteers. So they've been doing most of the gleaning, and it's always going well because there's so much food that would go to waste, and there's a big need for that, especially, as we said earlier, south of the Toffee Curtain.
It's fun to do.
Yeah,
You've done it.
You volunteered.
I have done it.
Where did you glean?
I gleaned up in Granville doing apples and then in somewhere in Hampshire County doing squash. I've also done the diapers too. And the thing about the diapers and like buying them yourself versus getting donations about it is that you also can control what sizes because A, babies grow very quickly, and B, when you're relying on donations, people don't necessarily know which size of baby they're providing for. So, like, you'll end up with a glut in one area. The same way that, like, when you donate to a food bank, it's easier to just give them money than to do a can drive because they know how to spend the money better.
We're having a dinner this month, Wednesday the 20th. We're having a dinner the week before Thanksgiving to reflect on indigenous issues, but more importantly, to come together and enjoy the harvest for this year. It's going to be at the new Lighthouse building on Ray Street in Holyoke. Everyone is welcome. We will have volunteers come and help us cook. We ask for donations from $0 to $25, but obviously if you can donate more, that's great. There will be local foods. We also order some indigenous ingredients like wild rice, corn, and other things so that people can experience and reflect on indigenous foods. And we will have a couple of indigenous elders do storytelling and welcome us to Holyoke.
One of the things I just really like about the collective is we are a collective, and so each one of us can kind of lead a project if we want to, and the other ones are usually supportive as long as it goes along with our mission. So the composting has been my project, but everyone's been really supportive of it, and the gleaning was Neff's and the diapers were Kara's. So we kind of have all these different projects, but I feel like because we're a collective and we have equal power structure, we're also adaptable. So we can kind of just like see what the need is and be like, oh, we're gonna do this now. For just being part-time and for the most part volunteer, like we get a lot done.
If people are interested in volunteering but can't make it to the dinner, where do they go to look for information about this?
On our website, we have a page on our website where you can sign up to volunteer, and we'll email you opportunities. You can also just follow us on Instagram. We always post stuff there, and Facebook. Our website is holyoke-collective.org, and there's info there also about like the diaper fundraiser and the dinner.
And we're in front of the compost bins. That's one of the newest projects of the Holyoke Food and Equity Collective, the Community Compost Hub with Margot and Neff. Neff, we had you on before talking about some projects you have going on back in Oaxaca. What's the latest with Proyecto Rosendo?
I spent most of the summer down there this year, not only with my family because my dad passed away, but so I want to enjoy as much time with my mom as I can, but also build community. Climate change is hitting really hard indigenous communities, especially in Mexico right now. And everywhere, you see natural disasters everywhere. But the drought last year was extremely hard for people in Oaxaca. And it seems like people are taking notice and waking up. And this year we had about 5,000 trees to give away, and we ran out of them like within 5 to 6 weeks. It was really fast. Most of them were planted, but we also had a lot of meetings and a lot of community building with different communities. The need is there, same as the Holyoke Collective, is mostly volunteer run, and we are hoping to start raising money for next year. I don't have to tell you, we have wildfires right in the area in Massachusetts right now, which I never heard of.
Yeah.
Right. So
the pictures from Chicopee last week are nuts.
And the smell in the air, yeah.
Yeah, so we always keep saying the indigenous communities are at the front lines of climate change, and it is true, and it is getting dire. And the most basic needs are water, access to soil, and trees, literally just trees.
So we'll hopefully, when the next fundraiser locally happens for that, we'll have you on to talk about that again. Meanwhile, Chef Neff, you have often been the leader of Team Taco on the March for the Food Bank and are usually one of the only ones who gets dressed up besides me and Sean Barry, my right-hand man, with the shopping carts. Is Team Taco going to be joining us on the march this year?
Yes, we're a little bit late on creating our page, but we will make our page this week. And I'm still deciding on what I'm going to be. I've never seen that movie, Michael Myers, but I saw a TikTok of someone dressed as Miguel Myers, so maybe that's what I will be.
I love this idea.
I love it so much. Last week on the show, we heard about a locally produced documentary taking a look at book banning in places like South Carolina and Florida.
But up next, a fictionalized film about the true story of book banning in the Berkshires. We'll talk with filmmaker John Tedeschi, whose short film, A Book by Their Cover, will have a screening tonight.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering graduate programs in public affairs, public policy and administration, data analytics, and computational social science. umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Is it Tedeschi? How do you like to say it?
Thank you for asking. It is actually Tedeschi.
Tedeschi, okay.
Just like Susan Tedeschi?
Oh, like Tedeschi
Just like
trucks.
Susan Tedeschi.
And
exactly correct.
The mini supermarket chain that used to have to have one in Norton, Massachusetts.
You are absolutely correct. And it means Germans in Italian. It's plural Germans in Italian.
That is hilarious.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. The Triplex Cinema will be hosting a special screening of local filmmaker John Tedeschi's fictional narrative film, A Book by Their Cover, inspired by local events in Berkshire County, as well as events around the country, including book bans connected with the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. The film was shot entirely in the Berkshires.
A Book by Their Cover tells the story of Samantha, a 12-year-old girl who's discovering her sexuality and who discovers a book, a medical journal written in the 1960s. Her parents give her another more contemporary book, which she brings to her school, and a controversy ensues.
A very similar situation occurred last year at W.E.B. Du Bois Regional Middle School in Great Barrington over the well-known book Genderqueer, an incident which serves as inspiration for the film. John Tedeschi, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
I'll have a pack of Marlboro Lights and a Dr. Pepper. Oh, that's what I would order at Tedeschi's when I was probably a young and impressionable
that
child.
Says that.
Don't forget your scratch card.
Yeah, you need my scratchies.
Yeah, I'll have a large regular, a pack of butts, a couple of scratchies, and the newspaper.
Well, I'm wondering if it's the newspaper that inspired this short film. It's a half-hour-long film, just about. Tell us what prompted you to turn this into a fictionalized version of a very real story in the area where we live.
So, I live in New York City and also in Stockbridge, Mass, and heard about the situation. I'll just call it a situation. And then I learned that it was also in the national news. So I was very curious and questioning, like, what's going on? What is happening in this community that I thought it was very unexpected that this would happen in the Berkshire region. So I read some things about it, learned about it. I also attended the meeting that was over Zoom. I listened to that. And as I was listening to the meeting, I realized that one thing that wasn't being talked about was if these resources and books are not available to young people, tweens, teenagers, and also queer teenagers, then a situation will happen where these young people are getting their resources in more covert or taboo or slightly shameful ways, and it sort of affects the young person in a way that's just not positive. So having these books is a good resource, and I just wasn't hearing that talked about in the meeting. And as a queer person, I thought it was very important that that was discussed. I remember being a young person and waking up in the middle of the night and like you mentioned earlier about the medical journal and reading about that and learning that it was classified as a mental disorder. And this was a book that was written in the 60s, so not too long ago. So as I listened to the meeting, I thought it was important for me to do something about it. For me, I was inspired to write something about it, and that became a film.
And then the other option being, you read this book that's from the 1960s that says that you've got some sort of major problem, or you turn to the internet and you find all sorts of things, many of which may be disturbing, harmful, untrue.
Exactly.
From a pornographic standpoint all the way to an ultra-religious standpoint, what you might be exposed to there could be more dangerous, perhaps, than a book that has been vetted by a librarian and put in a school library or a public library.
I feel like all of these book banning arguments ignore the fact that the internet is real and way more accessible by your child than by you.
Yeah, and that was something that was part of the film. That was asked of me. It was like, well, why doesn't she just go online in the computer? And it was like, well, that's kind of the point we're making, that it's better that if the parents are involved, the teachers are involved, the educators are involved, because then it really guides the young person in a beneficial, positive way. And without that, these book bans make it many times a much, much worse situation than it ever could have been if the book was just read.
We're speaking with filmmaker John Tedeschi, who makes his home in the Berkshires and in New York City. The short film is called A Book by Their Cover, and it will be screened tonight, November 14th, 7 p.m. at the Triplex Cinema in Great Barrington, where there will be a conversation with the director as well as some of the cast and crew. One of the things about both the true story that we mentioned in Great Barrington at W.E.B. Du Bois Regional Middle School was that there was a custodian involved in the discovery of this questionable material. That is part of what is true about your short film as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, because we've never met in person, and I don't have the character list memorized, but it does appear through IMDb that you are not only the writer and the director, but you are the villain of this story. Is that indeed you who plays the custodian in your short film, the custodian villain of the story?
I must admit that I do play Carl Stallings, the custodian / villain of A Book by Their Cover.
One of two villains, I would say.
Yeah, there's a couple villains perhaps in this.
There are a couple.
Yeah, talk about the decision to play that role as somebody who is a queer person and who was moved by this story enough to write a movie about it.
I love that you are asking me this question, and the answer to me is very important, and it's something that some people have picked up on, and a lot of people it sort of brushes over, which is fine. I am one of the only queer people that are in the cast or the production company of A Book by Their Cover, and because of that, I found it very important that I play this person who causes all these problems to the queer community and this young person. I found that it made the most sense and the most ironic sense for me to play the role, and that's what I did.
Was any of the dialogue that we hear in the meeting that happens in this movie, because it does follow the events that happened in Great Barrington a bit, where the book is confiscated, there is a meeting about it, you were at that meeting. Was any of the dialogue from that cribbed directly from things that you heard?
The book is definitely very inspired by the events, and some of the dialogue, some of what's written is also inspired. There's nothing that's directly quoted, but yes, there are some definite things that were inspired by the conversations that people have said in the press, whether they're a superintendent or a police person or a high school student who did attend Du Bois. There were some really compelling things that were said at the meeting and in press that I've read that I just thought were very important to the narrative of the story.
And I ask because one of the arguments that gets made by a parent is that people should wait until their children are of age of majority to encounter materials like this. And that's an argument that we've heard made at book banning meetings across the country. And I find it interesting and important that that argument was put into your movie.
Thank you. Yes, I grew up with parents who said, if you're old enough to ask, you're old enough to know. What that means, though, is that, yes, you can get an answer and a good answer, but you might not get all of the answer, and make sure that the answer is available, but also that this younger person can handle the answer. In the film, one of the townspeople says, perhaps we should wait until the students are 18 or even 21 for them to read these books. And this is an argument that said that, maybe they have to be of a certain age. And I do agree with that there needs to be an appropriate age group for books to be read and taken in by these students. But if the student is within that age, I think that is completely fine. And then if the educators or the parents or the guardians are getting these resources and books for their child, then that is fantastic. And that's how it should be.
Coming up, more with John Tedeschi on the Berkshires as a character in the film, and some more advice for parents whose own children may be curious about these types of banned books.
John's film, A Book by Their Cover, will be screened in Great Barrington at the Triplex tonight.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. We're speaking with writer, director, and villain John Tedeschi about his new short film, A Book by Their Cover, where he plays the villain in this story about book banning and controversies therein that parallel and resonate with true stories that have happened here in the Berkshires, specifically in Great Barrington, where this film will be screened tonight at the Triplex in Great Barrington. You mentioned your parents saying how if you're old enough to ask, you're old enough to know. One thing I was particularly moved by in your your short film was the portrayal of the parents of this young queer 12-year-old. As a parent myself who have children of varying sexual orientations and level of queerness, I've done my best to try to be as loving and compassionate to their journeys as I can be. Were the parents in this book inspired by your own parents and your own journey?
Yes, they were. They definitely were. And also the film has grandparents that would have been more age appropriate of my parents. So I sort of used the grandparents and the parents to sort of create this parental unit. That was important to me, to write these characters as open-minded and helpful, but also they're a little bit cautious about how to respond to this. So they do educate themselves a little bit more fully, and then they get back to Samantha, and then this book is brought for her to digest. The parents, it's very subtle, but the father does make sort of a face where the eyes are a little bit like, okay, how are we going to take this all in? And that's all. It was important to me that it was a realistic situation, that the parents were supportive and not negative, but also still like, okay, this happened.
Yeah, and if you're a parent and your child comes out to you as gay and your worst violation is an eye roll, I'm going to let that slide.
Exactly. When I came out to my parents, it took a long time, and I was worried about it, and I was more worried about one of my parents than the other parent, and then it turned out that everything was basically fine. I was very lucky, and my father said to me, and I don't think this is true, but I wasn't going to correct him because it was such a great thing that he said and very supportive. He said, well, if Frank Sinatra can have a gay son, so can I. And I don't think Frank Sinatra has a gay son, but hey, I'll take it.
I want to ask you about shooting in the Berkshires, because your film is shot entirely in the Southern Berkshires. What was it like doing that filming in Massachusetts?
I got incredibly lucky by using the Berkshires and the locations, and it was great. And because the state of Massachusetts is really encouraging of films being produced and shot in the state, so that was quite the benefit to have that happen. And then I am friends with people who are educators, so I was able to use a middle school in Otis for the entire school scene. I was able to use a market in Great Barrington. I was able to use two different homes in Stockbridge. We filmed on Main Street in Stockbridge in front of the library, as well as in front of St. Paul's Church. That was absolutely incredible to have these locations, and being near enough where the actual situation happened was very important. A lot of the shots in the film are actually inspired by Norman Rockwell painting. I think that the Berkshires is an important character in the film.
Well, I think especially, too, because we've heard so much about book bans that have been going on in other parts of the country. And we just had another filmmaker on who did a documentary about book bans last week on the show. So when these things hit home to an area that likes to present itself as overwhelmingly progressive and liberal, I think it's an extra important piece of the puzzle.
But also, I think, really important in this, not just in showing, like, growing queer youth, but, like, showing just the mundanity of growing queer youth. Like, to desensationalize the queer experience, I think, is also really important, even if it's through something, an incident that in itself got sensationalized.
Yeah, I mean, the gay community does not need to be taboo. It happens in every town, in every place of the world. So, when it is filmed in this Berkshires where it's just not anticipated, it's important that that is reflected. We are everywhere, and these situations happen, and we need support and understanding just like anybody else.
I think that Norton Smith said on our shows, like, it's important to show that we as queer people are just as boring as everyone else.
Yes, and the Norton Smiths were the couple from Northampton who sued the state of Massachusetts to earn the first equal marriage in the Commonwealth and in the country, frankly, and that all also originated here in Western Massachusetts.
Yes, it did, and that was not missed on me or the film, and that was also important as sort of the background. I named the custodian's character Carl Stallings, and it's Stallings because quite literally is stalling progress. That was something that was extremely disappointing about the Berkshires, so hopefully we're getting back on track.
I thought maybe you named him Stallings because he's a custodian and he had to clean the bathroom stallings, but... perhaps not. The film is called A Book by Their Cover. It will screen tonight in Great Barrington, which is the location that was the inspiration for this short film about book banning in schools. It was written and directed and stars as the villain, John Tedeschi, who's been joining us. John, I hated you in the movie, but I think I really like you in real life.
Thank you very much, I guess. And,
no, it means you did your job well.
I guess I will take that as both compliments. And I appreciate all that you're doing for us artists in the community and also for the community as a whole. And I also think that the documentary that you featured is an incredible piece and should be seen by everybody also.
On the next Fabulous 413, it's Indigenous Peoples Month, and we'll talk about the foodways and recipes of the Mashpee Wampanoag people and the incredible legacy of their relationship with the land, and author Angela Marcelino, who'll speak at the Great Falls Discovery Center on Saturday.
Plus Live Music Friday with Jim Hewitt of the East Hampton-based Lost Film, who you're listening to right now. A toast as the Wine Thunderdome returns to its birthplace, State Street Fruit Store, Deli Wines and Spirits in Northampton.
Where if you support the food bank, you might discover that you have a golden ticket that could bring you here to our show for a forthcoming Live Music Friday.
Details tomorrow during the Wine Thunderdome. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Khalees Smith. We will talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
I know.